Good evening, I'm Britt Clennett in Hong Kong and welcome to View TV News. Coming up on tonight's show. Tung Chung residents cry foul over the influx of tourists as the mega bridge clocks a new record high of travellers over the weekend. The Fire Services Department raises eyebrows with its bizarre new campaign aimed at stepping up community outreach. And President Xi Jinping promises to offer up China's world-class business environment as he opens the new Shanghai International Expo. First up tonight, the number of passengers going through the local checkpoint on the Hong Kong-Zhuhai-Macau Bridge hit a record high this weekend. Yesterday's figure exceeded 100,000. But anger is mounting among residents in Tung Chung after the residential district was swamped with tourists. The tourism industry, though, is pointing fingers at mainland travel agencies. Lydia Sung has the story.
These mainland tourists weren't queuing for some exciting outlet sale in Tung Chung. This was the line for the designated B6 bus to take them back to the port control of the cross-border bridge last night. Just 2 weeks since its opening, already local residents are saying the tourist influx is taking a toll on their daily lives.
It's really tough. Sometimes the supermarket shelves are just emptied out. We can't get the groceries we want.
It was difficult enough before to get a seat in restaurants in Tung Chung. Now with so many tourists here, it's even worse.
DAB lawmaker Holden Chow, who's also a district councillor for Lantau, agrees. He's calling for the bus stop to be moved and a new shopping complex to be built near the border to cater to the tourists.
One of our suggestions is to move the bus stop to the temporary terminal next to Nongping 360. It's further away from the residential area, and it could help divert the crowd from the town center.
And according to tourism sector's UC Wing, there's a more sinister problem at hand too.
Some unlicensed mainland travel agents were working as local tour guides here. They should actually be considered illegal workers. I urge the Security Bureau to step up patrolling and prosecute those who do so.
Meanwhile, some lessons were learned following the travel chaos from the weekend before. On a radio show this morning, Tourism Industry Council's Jason Wong said about 30% of Hong Kong tour groups over the weekend used the new pre-booking service for port-to-port coaches. That means mainland-bound travelers didn't have to line up when they arrived at the port area. Wong said he would talk to bus operators about further increasing the frequency of those coaches.
The Fire Services Department is raising eyebrows with its new outreach program. It features a character in a skin-tight blue suit, commonly known in Japan as a zentai, which covers the entire body from head to toe. The outreach program aims at educating the community on some first aid techniques, such as how to perform a CPR or cardiopulmonary resuscitation, and how to put out a fire. The department said its mascot, whose name in Chinese rhymes with the term for anyone, hopes this will prepare everyone in Hong Kong in cases of emergency. Whatever the public thinks of the idea at the very least, it's already gone viral. All right, well, the Exchange Fund reported a drop of nearly 97.5% year-on-year in its third quarter investment return. Speaking at a LegCo committee meeting today, HKMA Chief Executive Norman Chan said this was due to the volatile markets amid increasing trade tensions between China and the US. Chan also addressed questions about property prices, which have dropped for a fifth week in a row. He said it's still too early to decide whether or not to relax market cooling measures.
In any case, without the trade war, the overheating risk in the property market in Hong Kong is quite prevalent. So I think with the rise in interest rates in Hong Kong, the first rate hike in mortgage rate actually happened recently. That may have an impact on the property market, but I suppose the sentiment would be affected very significantly if the trade war worsens or sustained for a long period of time.
To the latest on the inquiry into the death of a rape suspect who was found to have hanged himself with a computer cable in custody last year. The coroner's court has ruled it was a suicide. The jury came out with a unanimous decision as well as 11 suggestions to prevent anything similar from happening again. That includes installing security cameras in holding cells and upgrading the other CCTVs at police stations. The 48-year-old suspect hung himself while in custody at Shao Maoping police station last May after he was arrested for allegedly raping and robbing a 22-year-old woman. In the MTR's Hung Hom Station shoddy works hearing, key witness Jason Poon says he'll hand over proof to show how unreliable main contractor Leighton Asia is. The MTR lawyer grilled the boss of subcontractor China Technology, continuing to cast doubt over his credibility. Poon claims he'd thrice reported workers cutting short steel bars to MTR senior management at the Hung Hom site in September 2015. But the lawyer pointed out Poon was only there twice, as shown in the records provided by Leighton. But Poon dismissed Leighton's records as all unreliable, saying he'll give the inquiry committee documents to prove his claims. Well, President Xi Jinping has opened a brand new major trade expo in Shanghai with a promise to offer the country's markets up to foreign businesses. Now, that's as China tries to address criticisms that its trade practices are unfair amid an increasingly bitter trade dispute between Beijing and Washington. Eve Johnson reports.
China is open for business. That's the message President Xi Jinping is trying to sell at a big expo this week, while Beijing fights an escalating trade war with Washington. President Xi on Monday kicked off the first ever China International Import Expo with a promise.
China will lower tariffs, make customs clearance more convenient, reduce institutional costs in the import sector, and speed up the development of new business models.
Thousands of foreign companies have flocked to the expo in Shanghai, hoping to find a foothold in the world's second largest economy, with products from coffee to cars to crude oil. China's market for imports is growing, bringing in $1.84 trillion worth of goods in 2017, up 16% from the year before. The expo comes as Beijing is under fire from countries like the United States, which feel they're getting the short end of the trade relationship. President Xi seemed to be trying to change the conversation, vowing to keep opening up sectors from education to telecoms.
China's open door will not close. It will only open wider, and China will not stop taking steps towards building a community with a shared future for mankind.
But in spite of the promises, critics don't expect a big shift in Beijing's trade policy anytime soon. Some Western diplomats and businesses say the expo is nothing more than window dressing for Beijing's long-standing trade abuses.
All right, let's check on what else has been happening in the world of business. And let's take a look at market action in Hong Kong and the mainland. The Hang Seng Index tumbled more than 2% to close at 25,934 points. Tech stocks exposed to the US-China trade war were hit particularly hard today, with Apple supplier AAC Technologies down more than 7%. Across the border, the Shanghai Composite slid 0.4% to 2,665 points. Consumer and health stocks were among the day's worst performers. Meanwhile, the mainland services sector showed its slowest growth in over a year as new orders dried up. The Caixin Market Services Purchasing Managers Index fell to 50.8 in October from 53.1 in September. That's the lowest reading over the past year. China's services sector accounts for more than a half of its economy. So the slowdown in the sector is particularly worrying for policy makers, as they have been counting on it to offset rising pressure on exports from a heated trade row with the US. There's been a boom of family offices in Hong Kong and Singapore thanks to rich Asians who want more control over their assets. Reuters report says these private investment vehicles are evolving from being investment-focused to offering a platform for dispute resolution and succession planning. Well, it's a relatively new concept in Asia, with less than 500 such entities compared to thousands in the West. But bankers say this is fast changing. Citi says it plans to make a new Hong Kong-based hire in its Asia Pacific Family Offices team, and Credit Suisse says it's setting up a family office team in Hong Kong by Q1 2019, adding to its Singapore hub. Well, it's a big week ahead for the markets with trade, inflation and GDP figures out from major economies. But politics will cast a shadow over everything as the US head to the polls tomorrow for the midterm elections. Laura Fragberg reports.
A major week ahead for markets, starting with Monday's Eurozone finance ministers meeting. On the menu, a mix of budgets, bailouts and greater integration. The same day, the EU's Brexit negotiator delivers a speech on Britain's move in the opposite direction as the Brexit divorce deal deadline draws ever closer.
I would say that there is a 90% probability that some sort of deal between Mrs May and the EU will be brought back to Parliament. I suspect, however, that Parliament will reject a deal between Mrs May and the EU, and what optimism we have at the moment could dissipate very quickly.
And that could be the case on Tuesday, when the week's biggest event could trump any market recovery. The midterms are the largest test yet for the US president and his party's dominance of the House and Senate.
I think if there is a change, in other words, the Democrats do really well, then the markets will begin to worry about whether some of the promises and the tax cuts and so on and extra spending will all come through. If prospects change in any way, whether that will also change the prospects for interest rate increases. They have been crucial.
All eyes then will be on the Fed meeting the day after the midterms, being held on the back of an October that's seen strong US job growth and wages at their largest annual gain in more than 9 years.
I don't think they will take action. There will be no new data on the economy. Instead, I think that we will see a 25 basis points hike at the December meeting.
Chinese and European trade data out Thursday could illustrate the impact of the isolationist path Washington's been walking, while forecasts by the European Commission may give a grim outlook for the EU and Eurozone economy. That too could be apparent in a raft of GDP, construction and trade figures out at the end of the week from China, France and the UK.
Let's go to a break now, but still to come on our show, China is among global powers vying for a slice of Papua New Guinea. Find out why when we return.
One world, infinite visions. View TV 6.
What am I hoping for this season? I'm hoping my guy brings Showtime back to LA.
I hope the Warriors are ready to be tested.
Yeah.
We hope the rest of the country sees a lot more Thunder.
I respectfully disagree. I'm hoping for some courtside seats this season. What's so funny?
What am I hoping for? Something that leaves me speechless.
The Houston Rockets versus San Antonio Spurs. Sunday morning at 9:30, live on Channel 99 View TV. TV fun knows no age boundaries.
Are you gonna use your powers? That was fun. Time to
Sit back. We have a lot in store for you.
I'm ready for a story adventure. So come on, we'll show you it's true.
Cartoons that every child, even adults, should be watching. Weekdays from 4:30 to 7. Get playful on View TV 6. Created by the legendary chef Gordon Ramsay. 9 home cooks sharpen their knives, tie their aprons and battle it out. Cookery combat under extreme pressure. Amateur cooks go through rigorous challenges. Bust a gut to impress celebrity chefs from around the world.
Good luck.
Who can stand the heat of the kitchen? Who can take home a cash prize and earn the coveted title of Culinary Genius? Sunday nights at 8 on View TV 6.
Hard-hitting investigative reports. Newsmaker interviews. Compelling human interest stories. Life-changing reports. News magazine that draws you in. 2020. Saturday night at 9:30 on View TV 6.
Welcome back. The Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum kicks off in Papua New Guinea in less than 2 weeks. And the Pacific Island nation is finding itself at the centre of a global donors battle. Michelle Hennessy tells us why.
Papua New Guinea has never been so popular. Big world players will all be looking to win over the small island state at the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, or APEC. The competitors are all vying for a slice of influence in the region, sending flashy gifts to one of the poorest countries in the Pacific. Here to explain its appeal, Reuters' Jonathan Barrett.
It has a lot of resources, in particular oil and gas. It also has deep water ports, which could potentially carry military vessels, and it is one of the closest land masses to the US military operations on Guam. Australia has historically been the major ally of Papua New Guinea, but in more recent years, China believes that the South Pacific is its backyard and its area of influence.
Most of the big-ticket items will be branded with Chinese insignia. It's refurbished the Showpiece Convention Centre and funded a new boulevard. While sources told Reuters what residents really need is medical and school equipment, the Beijing-funded street is set to include illuminated footpaths and nature reserves. In a not-too-subtle sign, there's a new player in town. The PNG government is keen to put on a show at the forum. It's even flown in a fleet of luxury cars like Bentleys and Maseratis.
This has caused some outrage in local communities and there have been protests. Our sources tell us most visiting leaders will have their own armoured vehicles, so it's not apparent what these luxury vehicles will be used for, and this is creating some angst. This is happening at the same time as PNG is still recovering from a deadly earthquake about 9 months ago, and there's also been a recent outbreak of polio.
But the big regional powers like Australia will be reluctant to criticise the government as it looks to beat out China for important defence ties with the island.
Lawyers for two Reuters reporters jailed for 7 years in Myanmar have lodged an appeal against their conviction of breaking the country's Official Secrets Act. The appeal cited evidence of a police set-up and lack of proof of a crime. In a statement, Reuters President Stephen Adler accused the Yangon District Court of serious due process violations. He also called on Myanmar to uphold its stated dedication to rule of law, freedom of the press and democracy by ordering the reporter's release. Walone and Cho So-u were found guilty in September in a landmark case that sparked an outcry from free press advocates around the world. South Korea has been granted a waiver from the US on Iranian oil imports. That's as sanctions against Tehran come into force. But as our South Korean correspondent Joseph Kim reports, it's just one in a bundle of negotiations being made between Washington and Seoul.
After months of negotiations, South Korea will be among a number of select countries to receive a temporary exemption from sanctions against Iran, according to Reuters. From oil imports to financial transactions, Seoul will be given a 180-day grace period, which will give the country some breathing room as it largely depends on Iranian oil. But in the America First era, this exemption is just one part of the many negotiations Seoul is engaged in with Washington, from steel tariff waivers to engagement with Pyongyang to restart diplomatic relations. And while the situation with North Korea has improved since last year, there currently is an impasse on denuclearization, which the Trump administration still heralds as a victory ahead of the mid-elections. Just before the expected meeting between Pompeo and his North Korean counterpart Kim Yong-chol, the U.S. and South Korea held a small-scale military exercise, which has largely been suspended for talks. And amid all of this, Washington and Seoul are still engaged in negotiations for cost-sharing of U.S. troops stationed in South Korea.
French President Emmanuel Macron and his German counterpart Frank-Walter Steinmeier began commemorations last night to mark the 100th anniversary of the end of World War I. They took part in an evening ceremony in Strasbourg on the Franco-German border. Macron faces a week of historic commemorations and intense diplomacy as he hosts more than 60 world leaders at a peace gathering in Paris. The US and Russian presidents are among those set to attend a final ceremony on November 11th, the actual centenary and the opening of the inaugural Paris Peace Forum. The gathering is an initiative to improve international cooperation and governance. Well, crisps are a popular snack everywhere, especially in the UK, where it's seen as a national obsession. But this means millions of packets are adding to the already frightening mountains of trash every day. Well, two British farmers have come up with an idea to make this indulgence more eco-friendly. Jim Drury has the details.
Crisps are the UK's favourite snack, with millions of bags eaten daily. But there's a downside, and not just for our waistlines. Metallised plastic film wrappers aren't recyclable and litter Britain's streets and seas. Two British potato farmers want to help. They've devised compostable crisp bags, launched under their new brand, Two Farmers.
The film's essentially very, very similar in look and feel, but it's created from eucalyptus wood pulp, made into a cellulose film, layered. Two layers in here, an outer layer and a metallised inner layer, but both fully 100% compostable, including the inks and the glues used to seal it together. In terms of crisps, we're not aware of anybody else that's producing crisps and putting it into compostable packet. There are other products around in compostable packaging, but nothing in the crisp market.
Once put into a home composter, packets break down in 6 months. 7 weeks ago, these bags had crisps inside. Now they're biodegrading while being used to grow small trees.
We personally think that compostable's a very good solution in terms of land and sea. If it ends up in the sea, it will break down in 26 weeks. It will dissolve back into water and leave no microfibres.
Potatoes are taken from their nearby farm, with the pair proud of their eco-credentials.
Well, we've got renewable energy on the farm in a form of anaerobic digester, where we've got making gas out of products we grow on the farm. That gas then runs an engine to make electric. We then use the electric to run the frying facilities, making the crisps. And in the future, going forward, we hope to use the gas to run the fryers for the crisps.
The firm is small scale, but plans to expand when word spreads. A new version containing a third layer will soon be available for overseas export.
All right, time now for sports. Starting with tennis and one of the biggest upsets of the year, Russia's rising star Karen Khachanov is probably still coming to grips right now that he stunned incoming world #1 Novak Djokovic to win the Paris Masters. Djokovic was on a 3-month winning streak but looked tired after an epic 3-hour semi-final win against Roger Federer on Saturday. Big hitting Khachanov handed the Serb 31 crushing winners, taking down the 4-time Paris winner in just over 1.5 hours. Final score 7-5, 6-4. The victory moves the 22-year-old to a career-high ranking of 11th.
I mean, it means the world to me. It's one of the biggest titles in my career so far, and I couldn't be happier to finish the season like this, you know, to win the last tournament of the season, especially Masters 1000 against Novak Djokovic, world #1 in the world. So that's all explanation.
Football next. Manchester City boss Pep Guardiola praised Raheem Sterling's maturing mentality as the forward struck twice to help the Premier League leaders crush Southampton 6-1. City took just 6 minutes to open the scoring at Etihad Stadium with an unfortunate own goal by Southampton defender Wesley Hurt. Sergio Aguero doubled City's lead by tapping in Sterling's cross before David Silva slammed home their third. The Saints finally got one in as Danny Ings pulled one back from the spot. But then Sterling netted either side of the break and Leroy Sané added a late sixth to cap off a fine afternoon. Turning to the New York City Marathon, where Kenya's Mary Ketani won her fourth crown, while Ethiopia's Lasia Desiza won the men's race for the first time. Ketani is only the third person to win the race 4 times, and she clocked the second fastest time at the finish in Central Park at 2 hours, 22 minutes and 48 seconds, more than 3 minutes ahead of her competition. In the men's, Desiza surged ahead of 2 other runners in the final kilometre to win in 2 hours, 5 minutes and 59 seconds. After spending 5 months at sea, a 33-year-old man came ashore on Sunday to become the first person to swim around the mainland of Great Britain. British adventurer Ross Edgley crossed the finish line off the coast of Margate, Kent, after swimming 2,865 kilometres. Edgley left Kent on June the 1st and had not set foot on land since. He swam for up to 12 hours a day, battling strong freezing currents as well as braving storms and jellyfish. In mid-August, he broke the world record for the longest stage sea swim of 73 days set by Benoit Lecomte, who swam across the Atlantic Ocean in 1998. All right, that's it for now. See you later.